Hello and welcome to our watercolor journey. The bokeh effect opened exciting new doors for watercolorists, and in this beautiful lavender bokeh we are not only going to look at how to create the effect, but how it helps to let your elements stand out. So gear up and come paint with us. As always, the materials used are listed in the description below. The Winsor & Newton block is flat on the table and taped with masking tape to create a white border. He didn't make a sketch, instead he used the masking fluid and a large pastel blending brush to draw the flowers, to preserve some of the white of the paper, which he will then use as highlights in the lavenders. He makes tiny dots with the masking fluid, roughly in the shape of the lavenders, placing them in lines, but relatively randomly on the page. He also uses the masking fluid to draw in some of the stems of the flowers, to give him a guideline to work with when he places the background colors. Let the masking fluid dry naturally. Using a hairdryer might make the masking fluid difficult to remove. The masking fluid here is rather thick, so it might take longer to dry. Give it about 15 to 30 minutes. Test for dryness by lightly touching it with your finger. It should feel cool and a bit tacky, but it shouldn't stick to your finger. The fluid is now dry and we are ready to go. He's wetting the entire paper with a Princeton 1-inch mop, making sure there are no puddles or dry patches. Winsor & Newton paper can take lots of water, so don't be shy to wet it thoroughly. On the palette, we have Cobalt Blue by Winsor & Newton, a premix of Cobalt Blue and Quinacridone Red by Holbein, Dioxazine Violet or Winsor Violet by Winsor & Newton. For the greens, we have Perylene Green by Winsor & Newton and a touch of Davies Grey by Holbein. He uses New Gamboge by Winsor & Newton straight from the main palette to bring light into the background. He uses the Silver Black Velvet No. 12 round and Cobalt Blue to start the background. He makes vertical brush strokes to help create the illusion of plants in the furthest background. He follows that with Dioxazine Violet or Winsor Violet, making broad, sweeping strokes from top to bottom, blending the violet into the cobalt with each stroke. Without cleaning the brush, he adds bold strokes of New Gamboge to create contrast and variation in the background, again blending it into the existing colors. Notice how the mixing of the New Gamboge and the Dioxazine Violet creates a greenish brown color. Next up is Perylene Green. He uses a fairly strong mix and layers it on the sides, as this will create the background for the stems and leaves of the lavenders, blending it into the other colors. Then he adds a touch of Davies Grey to push back the middle of the field a little bit, and then a bit of Perylene on the side again. The darker Perylene will bring some of the stems to the foreground, while the paler Davies Grey will help them recede. He adds some more violet, mixing it in to create the browns again. He adds these paints quickly because it needs to be done wet on wet. Now he adds the premix of cobalt blue and quinacridone red. This is a cooler purple or violet combination, so it will also recede a little bit. Adding all these different tones and values creates depth in the background. While the paper is still wet, he starts to add the first layer of the lavenders. He uses the silver black velvet number 2 round. He varies between the dioxazine violet and the cobalt blue and quin red mix to paint the lavenders. He dabs the paint lightly in between the masked areas to create the out of focus flowers in the background, and he also dabs some onto the masked areas to create the background for the more detailed flowers. Now he adds the stems with perylene green, still wet into wet, drawing them in with light, fast strokes, using only the tip of the brush. Here he's using the perylene green straight from the main palette. It's a creamier consistency, so the paint is much darker, still using very quick, light strokes. For the broader strokes with a more watery perylene, he presses a little harder on the brush. Let the painting dry. You still have masking fluid on it, so do not use a hairdryer. The flowers have dried to a soft, cottony purple. He uses a rubber cement eraser to remove the masking fluid. You can use a tissue, a plastic eraser, or your finger to do this. Make sure there's no residue left on the paper before you continue. Now it is finally time to make the bokeh circles. He uses the Princeton No. 4 stencil brush to do this. Dip the brush in water, dab it lightly on a towel to remove excess water, and then brush in a circular motion where you want the bokeh circle to be. Use a paper towel to remove any water left on the paper before you go to the next circle. The harder you press, the more paint you will lift off. Make sure to rinse the brush regularly, as it will transfer paint from one area to another. It is important to vary the sizes and placement of the circles. The circles can touch or overlap to enhance the blurry effect. To give you more control over the shape and size of your circles, you can use a plastic stencil. Be careful, however, as the water might seep underneath the stencil and mess with your background. Dry the back of the stencil regularly to prevent this. Heinrich uses the different sizes on the stencil to bring variation in the circles. He makes the circles in the foreground more prominent and a bit bigger than those in the background to help create the depth in the painting. He uses the cobalt and quin red mix to start painting the lavenders in a kind of V pattern around the white dots on the paper, using only the tip of the number 2 brush. The paint is rather creamy, and because the background is dry, it won't soak in and it will dry with hard lines. These hard lines will help to let them stand out against the soft fuzzy background. Now he uses a fairly strong mix of dioxazine violet to add the second layer of the flowers in the same pattern, delicately painting in the shadows. By layering with a darker tone each time, he brings the flowers to the front and makes them stand out against the fuzzier background flowers. Here he uses the Babara #1 Rigger and a strong mix of perylene green to start painting in the stems. The strokes are a bit more deliberate than the previous strokes because they need to be more prominent. He still uses the tip of the brush to paint the stems. He uses the belly of the rigger to create the dry brush effects in the grasses. He adds a bit of the duller Davies grey to vary the depth of the foreground. To bring the background and the foreground into harmony, and also to add a bit of light, he brushes in a few strokes of new gamboge. He uses the perylene green and also dioxazine violet to make some splatters in the foreground to give a bit more texture. He also splatters in a bit of permanent white gouache by Winsor & Newton to add a few more highlights into the flowers. If you have any questions or suggestions about the painting or the techniques used, please leave us a comment below. Thank you so much for watching. Vaya con Dios.